Hello and welcome back to The Drag Detective, where today we are going to be breaking down the pretty crazy edit that we got for one of the most controversial, I would say beloved, and memorable queens of this entire season, Loosey LaDuca. There's a lot to break down. She's had a wild ride of a season, both on the show and off, and we're gonna kind of discuss all of it, like we've done in other videos with Jan, with delusional edits, with villain edits. We're just gonna kind of break down what her edit was telling us and kind of where the show was trying to point us in how to perceive Loosey LaDuca. I get really interested in some of these really just like intense edits that the show gives us, because you can kind of see a direct correlation between what the show is telling us, what the audience is perceiving, how the queen is perceiving it themselves. It's like a whole story going on both on the show and off, and I just think it's really interesting to kind of dissect and look at. And this is one of the most, I think, interesting edits we've ever seen on the show, and especially on a season where I would say half, if not more, of the cast got kind of nothing to work with in the edit. So much of the season was focused on Loosey and her journey and her thoughts and how the other queens were perceiving her, and it really was kind of the big arc of the season. So I just think it's interesting to kind of pick apart and talk about. At times, it was like, are we getting into villain territory? At times, it's like, are we getting into delusional territory? And I think by the end of this video, we will be able to tell what exactly the category is of this edit. What kind of umbrella does it fall under of the edits that Drag Race kind of always goes back to because they are tried and true. So we will figure that out and solve that mystery as this video goes on. But before we get into all of that, I wish I didn't have to say all this, but it is necessary. I'm talking about an edit of a person on a television show, not who Loosey is as a human, not who Loosey is outside of the show, not even who she was the entire time that she was there, because especially with this shorter runtime on most of the season, we only got a small glimpse as to what these queens went through while they were there, what they did while they were there, how they acted, how they responded to everything going on. We only get a very, very small glimpse, and usually a one-dimensional type glimpse at these queens on the show. So I don't want anyone to watch this video and think that I'm dunking on Loosey as a person, think I'm dunking on her as a human outside of the show. That is not what's going on. We are simply looking at what the show gave us, who Loosey was on the television show Drag Race, and that is it. And that's a very small, small little piece of who Loosey is as a person. So just kind of keep that in mind as we talk about this. You know, don't send her any type of hate in any way. This was a really fun, very fun, insane, like crazy storyline that we got. I'm so grateful to Loosey for giving us all of this fun content, because without her and without Mistress, this season would have been boring. So I hope you don't perceive this as me dunking on her or as me saying I hate her and I think she's annoying and ugh. It is me celebrating a very interesting and fun storyline that we got on this season. And so thank you, Loosey DeLuca. I just said DeLuca. Thank you, Loosey LaDuca, for giving us amazing television. You are always going to be remembered on this show. I'm sure you will be asked back for All Stars, and I can't wait to see it. And also everything else that you do off of the show. So, without further ado, let's get into the very intense edit of Loosey LaDuca. Now, pre-season, I was very excited for Loosey. Just going through her Instagram, she is obviously a look queen. She's a comedy queen. She is kind of like a blonde Barbie type drag queen, kind of like we've seen with Trixie or with Ms. Cracker. Obviously, that's not a one-to-one comparison, but she's been in the vein of some of these prior fashion girls at the same time who are also comedy queens, and their drag kind of intersects at that place of like comedy, fashion, drag, Barbie. It's all just an amalgamation, and it's interesting to watch, and it's interesting to see the looks that she brought. But then she also is kind of like delving into this like horror Dragula like sphere. So Loosey definitely had a lot of stuff going on her Instagram that had me very excited for what she would bring to the show. And then, you know, seeing her entrance look and her promo look and her Meet the Queen, like everything that she was delivering, I was like, this is one to watch. And I think pre-season there was a lot of hype already for Loosey. She had a really fun Meet the Queens. The fact that she's a construction worker outside of the show. She has so many like layers to her already before the season even started that had people interested in her. So she was coming into the season already, I think, kind of being propped up by the fandom as a potential threat. And then as we go into the first episode, looking at the early days of her edit and kind of her first arc, because I would say the story of Loosey LaDuca on season 15 is kind of like a camel. There's 3 little humps to it. And the first hump is kind of taking place between episodes 1 and 4. So episode 1, she enters the workroom. She's one of the 4 Connecticut queens, so she's already kind of set up with some storylines with some of these other girls, which we don't dive into whatsoever. But that's where, we thought we were going to go. And she makes it very clear. She has a confessional where she says she's coming in and planning to win every maxi challenge and every mini challenge. And looking back in hindsight, with her and the mini challenge meme, it's just a fun little, almost like Easter egg to look back on. And she is kind of just around in the workroom. She's part of the second group of girls. She knows a couple of them. She's fun. We learn that she's a construction worker. And then we go into the talent show. The girls are kind of discussing what they're going to do. And Loosey's like, I'm going to sing live because that's taking a big risk. I think the judges are going to appreciate me swinging big right out of the gate. And, well, okay, it didn't work out for her. As we know, the iconic now, memed, to high hell moment of Let Loose, #1 on Billboard Hot 100 for 13 weeks straight, coming from Mariah Carey's gig with One Sweet Day. I mean, iconic moment. Iconic. And I think that now Loosey, I hope, looks back at this and is like, if you're gonna, not do well in a challenge, hopefully it is as iconic as this performance to Let Loose was. But also fully, I think that they sabotaged her with the mixing of this with her vocals over the music. It was tinny. It sounded like a Zoom, feedback almost. So it was not great. And she ends up in the bottom 3. And I was shocked to see, that this was happening to her so soon because, she seems like she's going to be such a powerhouse. And, to be in the bottom 3, episode 1, it shook me. It definitely shook her. And she very narrowly escapes the bottom 2. And, we see her kind of breaking down on the main stage saying she's never going to let this happen again. She has so much more to show, and she's going to prove to the judges why she deserves to be there. So we're kind of setting her up almost right off the bat for an underdog arc, for a growth arc. And that's kind of where we start for these first 4 episodes. Episode 3 is the, All Queens Go to Heaven challenge. She's playing Dolly Parton in her group's commercial. And she kind of starts off the episode saying, I didn't deserve to be bottom 3 after my performance. I don't know why I was bottom 3. She basically said rigged without saying rigged. And she is going to fight tooth and nail in order to be at the top. So right off the bat, we're getting some intense emotions from Loosey LaDuca, which is especially in these early episodes where there's no time for anything to happen in the workroom, she's delivering most of the good content. So the edit right now is saying Loosey does not think she did as bad as she did. Almost hinting at some delusion, I would say, with how the segment of her, talking about last week was presented to us. And she's saying, I'm going to fight back to the top and I'm going to win some challenges. So we're okay, let's see what happens. She does really well in this challenge. She is in the top, but she does not win. And episode 4 is the Loosey LaDuca, 1 hour special event where basically this entire episode, it's the Snatch Game episode, is all about Loosey. Literally all about Loosey. And especially in this episode where there's 14 minutes of Snatch Game, plus the lip sync, plus the runway, plus the judges' liberations. There's not really much time for anything else, but everything else is given to Loosey LaDuca. So we're given CPM 5 for an edugrating on this episode for her. She starts the episode by kind of getting into it a little bit with Luxx, which is also some foreshadowing for their, rivalry as the season goes on, where Luxx is Sasha Colby won the challenge, but I was a lovely second place. And Loosey LaDuca is no, I was a lovely second place. You were a lovely third place. And they're kind of going back and forth with this, and it's kind of petty because at the end of the day, who the fuck cares about second or third place? You're going to get that blue high placement on the Drag Race fandom anyway. So, this is definitely also a running theme for the season where plenty of queens do I was second place, actually, for this episode. So this is kind of where the genesis of that starts, with Loosey and Luxx kind of arguing about this. And Loosey is cool, I was in the top, now I need a win. And we know later that she does win this episode. But we also get a lot of Loosey content about her backstory. And for the story of this season, for the story of Loosey LaDuca on Drag Race Season 15, this is very important. because she goes into her childhood, she goes into where she comes from, about how she was bullied, about how she never felt like she belonged in her hometown, about how people would look at her funny when she walks around in her crop top and her short shorts. And listen, I might have a psych minor. I'm no psychologist. I'm not about to, like, psychoanalyze this girl, but it is kind of painting the story of Loosey having some insecurity issues because of where she comes from, because of how she was treated. And she almost has this barrier up of, like, you can say whatever you want to me and I'm going to let it bounce right off. Because what happened, growing up. It's almost like she does have this shield of not even, I don't know if insecurity is the right word. It's almost like a defensiveness of whenever anyone, throws a little bit of shade at her, she immediately perceives that as an attack. And, that's kind of what we see from her throughout the season. And this episode in particular sets that up and shows us this is where that defensiveness is coming from. And I think that is the one, I don't even know if necessarily delusion is the number one word that comes to mind when I'm thinking of her edit on the season. It's defensiveness. And that is, I think, what she struggles with the most throughout this entire season. She doesn't listen to what people are saying. She immediately perceives it as an attack, as someone, poking at her or insulting her. And sometimes they are, for both of those. But she perceives everything like that from what we see in the edit. And I'm going to stop saying from what we see in the edit because you don't need to hear it 1,000 times. Is Loosey being defensive about every single remark that comes her way that's even a slightly bit negative? So this episode, setting that up, setting up the backstory, setting up this is where that's all coming from, is necessary to where she's going to go for the rest of the season. Because if we didn't get this context, she's just being defensive and annoying. But if we know exactly where it's coming from, then we can understand it. And suddenly it takes a one-dimensional edit into almost of a 2 or 3-dimensional edit where it's like we're seeing this behavior exhibited time and time again, but we know where it's coming from. So it's not just a black and white issue anymore. It's a gray issue. It's a gray, the whole thing is a gray area of we know why Loosey's acting like this. We know where this is all coming from. And we can sympathize with that. If this one scene is not on the season of her talking about her upbringing and her background, I think that the perception of Loosey from the fandom is a lot worse because we're not getting that backstory. We're not getting where all of these, emotions are stemming from. And she's just a villain and she's just delusional. This one scene, I think 1,000% changes and switches up how we look at Loosey LaDuca and how the fandom perceives and treats Loosey LaDuca throughout the season. Now, in the Snatch Game, she plays Joan Rivers, the dearly departed, the icon of my heart, one of my favorite people to ever exist on this planet, and she knocks it out of the park. And she does something very smart, which is she obviously comes in with canned bits, with these jokes, these iconic jokes that Joan has done throughout the years, but she's able to place them where they make sense. And it's not just her saying, phrases like for no reason at all. She fits them into what's going on in the conversation, and it's so smooth. You don't even realize that these are jokes that Joan has said throughout the years that she's obviously memorized and kept up in here, but it really does feel like it's Joan right there saying a joke off the cuff. So she wins. Hands down. I mean, like, there's no other competition, really. She slayed these Snatch Games so hard. And now that first hump of the camel, the first kind of arc for Loosey is complete, where she flopped that first challenge. She said, I'm going to come back stronger. I'm going to win. I'm going to prove to the judges why I deserve to be here. And she did all of those things. She accomplished everything that she said she was going to do. And through that, we start to root for Loosey because she's not just empty promises of, queens on the stage saying, I won't let you down again, and then they're in the bottom the next week or the week after. This is a great underdog to, like, growth redemption arc done super well. And now the edit kind of doesn't need to focus on Loosey for a bit because I would say those first 4 episodes are very Loosey-centric. They start focusing on some other girls. The Mistress in Malaysia storyline starts to really pick up. Luck starts really picking up in her edit, and Loosey's there. We get some moments of Loosey, specifically ones that I wanted to point out are during the reading challenge, which she does win. We get the edit, and who knows if it's true or not, but this is what the edit showed us, of Loosey getting read by the other girls, and her face during the reads is very... And, you know, we'll get this sometimes. Sometimes we'll get, you know, one queen reading another during the reading challenge, and they're, like, screaming and laughing and having fun. And then sometimes we get the ones where it's like, they say a read, and the queen is like... And it's almost like Alexis Michelle, like, poor sport kind of vibes. That's what we get from Loosey in episode 5. Episode 6, she's really not in much at all. That's the girl group challenge. Episode 7, we get a little bit of Loosey content when we are doing Daytona Wins Part 2 Electric Boogaloo, where she's really wanting to win another challenge. She's, you know, doing really, really well in the challenge, but she's just safe. And in Untucked, it's a lot. It is a lot of Loosey content of her being fuming that she is safe and not in the top for the Daytona Wins Challenge. And from the perspective of the other girls, we can tell they're getting annoyed, specifically Sasha. Sasha is like, shut the hell up. Be happy you're safe and let's move on. Now, she's not saying this to Loosey, but through her facial expressions as the conversation is going on and what we hear in Sasha's confessionals, she's over it. She is over it. And my favorite thing, and we got really into this on my podcast episode about this Daytona Wins episode, where she annoys all of the girls who are in Untucked at first, all the safe girls, with her talking about it. Then all of the girls who got critiqued come in, and she brings up the conversation again so that she can say the same thing to a whole new group of people. And it's a lot. It's very funny. It's very funny. And it's just good Loosey. It's just good Loosey content. But, you know, regardless of if you think she was in the top, if you think she should have been safe, she even said on Twitter at the time that there was more of her part that got cut that maybe would have, you know, lent her to being in the top over someone else. Who knows, but she was not happy about it. This then continues into, she's talking about, you know, having challenge wins, and she's like, well, I have 3 wins. And actually, this might be 2 episodes after. We have the Lollapalooza, where, you know, she is safe. She's trying to, like, not say she picked Spice, because Spice was an easy out, but that's what she did, as she should. It's good strategy. The next episode is the ball, and she is, again, low, and disagrees with it. She does a, like, bad pageant queen, you know, runner-up, like, flop look. And, you know, I think that it wasn't necessarily rigged. This was just a really great ball, and it only took little tiny things that would, you know, set you into the bottom 3. But she doesn't think she should have been in the bottom. Then she thinks she should have won the 50-50 interview challenge, which she does really well. She's in the top. She thinks she should have won. And this is where she really starts to crumble. What it looks like to us, she really starts to crumble. Because Sasha is like, oh, I have 3 wins now. And Loosey LaDuca is like, I have 3 wins too. I have one main and 2 minis, so I have 3 wins as well. And I mean, to this day, in 15 seasons of American Drag Race, in probably, you know, 20 seasons of International, we have 8 seasons of All-Star, whatever. One of the moments that took the most audacity and the most delusion, but I screamed. I think I literally yelped. A sound emitted from my mouth that was, like, insane because of her saying this. Obsessed. I'm obsessed with her. Because who else is going to claim this? Who else is going to say, I have 3 wins, actually. 1 main and 2 mini. So we're actually on the same path, Sasha. We're actually, like, very neck and neck in this competition. It's everything to me. It is everything. I love it. I love the delusion. I love the delusions of grandeur. It's amazing. It's everything. And I mean, I think that we all perceived at the time that she was feeling very insecure about her place in the competition. She had 1 win, but it was kind of early on where, you know, episode 11 at this point, I think this happens. She only has 1 win. And on top of this, we also get Bumpgate, where Lux is like, Loosey, why weren't you wearing a bump in the challenge for Beyonce when Beyonce wore the bump? And she's like, well, actually, she wasn't showing. So, like, I didn't, you know, wear a bump. And Lux is like, yes, she was showing. And yes, you were wearing a corset, which is insane. And Loosey is very, like, defensive over this. Like, I made this decision. I studied this photo of Beyonce. I followed it to a T. we all know that Lux was in the right, that Beyonce was showing, but Loosey was not about to back down. She was not about to back down and say she was in the wrong. She's in competition mode, and she's like, I was right, you are wrong. So there's a lot of things kind of being thrown at Loosey right now. She's insecure. She hasn't won in a while. She was just in the bottom 3 a couple of episodes prior. She feels like she's been doing super well in these challenges that she should have won, but she hasn't won any of them. And now she has Lux kind of poking her a little bit, and she's feeling like she has to fight back and can't show any weakness against these girls, especially like with Mistress there and Lux, who were all about poking the bears and, starting drama and making entertaining television. And, I say this on the podcast all the time. There are the girls who are there to make good television, the Luxes and the Mistresses. And, they're there for other things. They're there to show off their drag. They're there to win competitions and, take home the crown. They're there to spread their drag around the world and, let people know who they are. But they are there to make good television. They know why they were cast. They know what production wants, and they're going to give it to them. And then there's girls like Loosey and Malaysia who aren't there to make good TV. They're not there to be, fighting with people. They're not there to, have these big storylines of rivalries. They're there to show off their drag, period. But by doing that, they also are definitely feeding in because they let the things affect them. They don't perceive this as, oh, they're wanting to make a good TV moment. Let's do this. They're perceiving it as, they're attacking me. I need to stand up for myself. And that is what Loosey does. And, we end up getting this really great storyline where she gets partnered with Lux right after they have this fight about, the baby bump. And they end up winning the challenge together because Loosey's really funny. Loosey knows how to tell great jokes and is great on stage. She has a great stage presence. And they win the challenge. They both get their second win. And I feel like this is the second hump. This is Loosey for the whole middle part of the competition being like more and more insecure every episode that she's not getting these wins. And then finally, it comes together. She gets that second win, and she's going into these last couple of episodes now at the top of the pack. I mean, there's like Sasha above her with more wins, but she's up there too. Her, Lux, and Sasha are definitely the front runners going into these last couple of episodes. Then we get to the Rusical, which is the beginning of the end for Loosey LaDuca. She just won her second challenge. She is getting a Rusical, which is kind of like right up her alley. She's a performer, she's a singer, and she's ready to continue this like slayage. And she wants the role of Heaven Bacon. And this is where Lux and Mistress are like, we can destroy her. We know how to make her crack, and we are going to do it. And it works because they're like, Lux, this role was made for Lux. It's not made for you, Loosey. And she's like, no, this role is definitely made for me. They're trying to get her to say that she wants the role because it's the biggest role. And I don't know why she doesn't just admit to it. I think that she kind of doesn't want to be seen as like taking the easy way out or like admitting to the strategy behind what she's been doing. But of course she wants this role because it's the biggest role. That just makes sense. And especially in a challenge where you're going to do super well at, you would want the biggest role. So you have the biggest platform to show off your skills. Cool, Loosey, like just say it. But she won't, and Mistress and Lux know that it gets to her when they point this out, and she gives them what they want, which is feeding into the negativity and poking the bear, for lack of a better term. She feeds right into it. She gets flustered and she gets upset, and that's exactly what Mistress and Lux want. And it ends up being, I think, the best episode of this entire season because there is so much drama and so many of these relationships that we've been seeing form throughout the first 12 or so episodes are starting to really reach a breaking point. And her relationship with Mistress and Lux is specifically one of those. She ends up getting the role that she wants, and she ends up being in the bottom, not because she did a bad job, but because she didn't do the best job. And in a challenge like where everyone is doing incredible, sometimes that's all it takes. This episode culminates in the who do you think deserves to go home now, where Lux goes down the line, tells Michelle and Rue why everyone is amazing, except Loosey. When she said, however, I knew it was going to be juicy. And Lucy's face when Lux tells her that she's generic is it's great television. She is shocked. She's, oh. And not saying that Lux was right to do that, but I do think that Lux was correct in some of her claims. Is Loosey's drag generic? I wouldn't say that, but I don't think that she's the most unique queen to ever step on this runway, and that's okay. Like, and that's very okay. You know, you don't have to be an Evie Oddly, you don't have to be a Milk, you don't have to be a Willow Pill in order to be a good drag artist. Like, not every drag queen has to be the most unique, never before seen thing ever. And I don't think Loosey is that unique. I think she's a great drag artist. I think she brought great looks. I think she has a great aesthetic, but it's not the most, like, unique thing I've ever seen in the world. So for her to, like, take that as she did and be like, I am unique, I am different, there's never been a drag queen like me before, it's a little like, oh, okay, Loosey. Like, okay, Loosey. Like, just listen to what Lux is saying. Don't take everything as, like, the biggest attack in the world. She almost takes it as, like, Loosey, your drag is terrible. You're a horrible drag artist. I don't know why you're on this show. And it's just, it's great TV for, you know, for her to take it the way that she did. And of course it's not going to feel great to have someone call your drag generic on television. But I don't think Loosey does herself any favors in how she's going to be edited or how the other queens are going to perceive her moving forward by taking it so personally. Like, so personally. And then you have, you know, her throwing her friend under the bus, Selena, who I wish we got to see more of that relationship throughout the season, because then that would really hit different. So this is kind of the culmination, this episode, of all of Loosey's storyline coming crashing down. She is giving it all that she has, and it's not enough anymore because everyone else is also giving it all that they have. She, you know, can't just take a criticism and sit with it and just accept that someone else thinks that she has to be so offended. She has to be so upset and devastated by this. That defensive wall is like taking hit after hit after hit after hit, and she's letting every single, you know, bullet hitting that shield make a dent. She's not letting any of them just, you know, bounce off. Every single one has to make a huge dent in her armor, and it's really starting to take a toll on her. And, you know, getting into her last episode where she gets sent home in the makeover, not because she does a bad job again, but because everyone is just doing so well that she's doing, like, the least well. Or I guess in this case, the second least well. And, you know, I really actually highly suggest, if you're liking this video and this content, listening to my podcast episode on the makeovers I did with Ange B from the Chop Block. We didn't really talk about the episode at all. We just talked about Loosey and her story, and it was a really interesting conversation that made me want to do this video. So I will link that episode in particular in the description below if you want to listen to that. And, you know, Loosey's story ends in this episode, but there's a telling moment in Untucked when Mistress asks both Lux and Loosey, like, Loosey, do you think you can beat Lux in a lip sync? And Loosey goes, I don't know. And she goes, Lux, do you think you can beat Loosey in a lip sync? And Lux says, yes, I think I can. And in that moment, I think if Loosey had just believed in herself a little bit more, she might have been able to put up a bigger fight in that lip sync, but it is kind of just the Lux show, and Loosey's the backup dancer. And she leaves. And you can tell that she's devastated. She doesn't think she deserves to go. She, you know, is throwing shade at Mistress on the way out. But in the moment, it's like, because of the storyline that she's been given, it did feel like her time to go. It did feel like these other four who were in the top four, they believed in themselves. They believed in their drag. They believed in why they made it this far. Whereas Loosey just felt like she was crumbling a little bit under the pressure, from my perception of what we saw. You know, that's just not a good look going into the top four. So, you know, then looking at the reunion, you know, I think that there was a big perception going into this reunion that it was going to be like fight after fight after fight. But it just seemed like, you know, whether she had conversations with the girls in between filming and now or not, that she maybe gotten over a lot of that stuff. You know, she's like, yeah, I was wrong in Bumpgate. Yeah, like, Mistress, you're great, and I get where you're coming from. The one stick that she did have still was Lux, you know, saying she was generic and deserved to go home in that one episode where Ru asked them. But it kind of seemed like Loosey kind of just gave in a little bit, and not saying that she, you know, should have just fought everyone the whole reunion, but it really did kind of seem like, okay, Loosey, I think, knows where everyone else is coming from and how she's being perceived, and she's definitely not giving them what they want, which is for her to pop off. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess it's up to you whether you want the entertainment or not. For Loosey's story, it does kind of feel like a little, you know, this balloon was getting bigger and bigger throughout the whole season. And going into the reunion, it was like this big. And we're waiting for the pop, where everything that she'd been through in this entire season we're going to come to a head in this reunion. We're going to talk about all of it. We're going to dig into all of it. And instead, the balloon doesn't pop. It's just someone lets go of it and it starts, like, deflating and doing that little, like, you know, like, flying through the air. That's kind of what it felt like. On one hand, I do understand why Loosey wouldn't give in to the, you know, the drama of it all, because that's not what she was there for. And that's not what she was necessarily looking for on Drag Race. But, I mean, I want good TV. You know what I mean? That's what I'm here for. And that reunion was, I could yawn right now thinking about it. So I think the story that we're left with for Loosey LaDuca is that she's a very, very talented drag artist. Very talented. But whenever there's any type of negative anything directed at her, she gets defensive and she doesn't necessarily take critique very well. And the other girls saw this right off the bat, saw her as an easy target for their, you know, little poking that they like to do. And from there, it spiraled into, you know, what we saw by the end of the season, where we have Mistress saying, I don't fuck with Loosey. And Loosey saying, I think you do fuck with me. And Mistress is like, yeah. Where then that was a really fun moment, because it's Loosey saying, I know that you're only doing this because we're on camera. And if this wasn't on camera, you wouldn't be acting like this to me. And Mistress saying, you're right, I wouldn't. And it was just a really kind of like letting the veil down a little bit. And it really did feel like Loosey saying, I'm not going to partake in what you're trying to do here. And Mistress kind of being like, yeah, like, that's fine, that's enough. And, you know, after that episode, Mistress and Lux do kind of let down a little bit on Loosey. So I do think it's a delusional edit. I do think we have, you know, I did a whole video on the delusional edit. I think this does get added to that list because the moments where she was delusional were highlighted so much and were made into such big moments. And, I mean, I think I had three stipulations of, like, this is what's necessary for an edit. Having an over, you know, inflated perception of how you're doing in the competition. I do think Loosey had that. Comparing your drag to others and kind of dragging others down while trying to prop yourself up. I do think Loosey had that at points, and bursting into tears at least once, and we definitely had that. We had that. So I think that Loosey does get added to the delusional edit group, but it's such an interesting one, and it's an interesting way that the audience, I think, perceived it, because I don't think they're leaving this season hating Loosey. I think that they're leaving this season saying Loosey made some great television. Loosey maybe was a little intense at some moments, but we appreciate that in this season where what she brought to the season is what we're going to remember. We're going to remember Loosey's delusional moments, her fight with Lux, her fights with Mistress. Like, those are all things we will take with us. And honestly, she comes into it, whatever All-Stars she wants to do, if she chooses to do an All-Stars, with a storyline built in. She's already set up great for an All-Stars arc. And that's a great place to be, because no one's going to cast Loosey on All-Stars and send her home first. We did that with Derek Barry, and it was the biggest mistake in the world. So I think Loosey's set up for a long and prosperous All-Stars run whenever she chooses to do that. This was just such a fun storyline. It really felt like we had, you know, it was like a beginning, middle, and end. It felt like we had, you know, like the plot things where it's like, oh, it's up and down, and, you know, it ends in this amalgamation of everything going down. I mean, that episode 12 of just everything crashing down on Loosey LaDuca was what is good television. Like, that is great television. And it suck that it's at the expense of a human being's, like, psyche, yes, but it was still great television. And I just want to personally thank Loosey LaDuca for being on the season, for giving us all of the content that we need to survive, and for making me gasp out loud multiple times throughout this season. So thank you, Loosey. Go support Loosey by streaming her single, by buying her merch, by going and seeing her out on the road, or even just leaving her a comment on any of her photos or tweets. You know, let's just appreciate this girl who gave us amazing television and entertained us for 16 weeks straight. So thank you, Loosey LaDuca. Let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on Loosey at this point in the season? Let's keep them positive, please. let's just talk about her run in general. And do you think it belongs on the list of delusional queens? I think I have that video like up in the top corner at some point in this video. You can go find it. The delusional edit on Drag Race is, I think, the video title. Do you think she belongs in that roster of queens that we've seen throughout the years? Let me know in the comments below. It is almost finale time. We have so many cool things happening on the channel, on the podcast, on my social media. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, where I'm posting all the results to this mega poll that I put out, which had 3,000 responses of all kinds of stuff throughout the season, so that'll all be on my Instagram. And for my finale thoughts, make sure you follow me on Twitter, where I will be spilling all of my thoughts and critiques and everything on the finale. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one.